Hello, everyone, and welcome to the movie show. I'm your host, Tyler Calkins, and today we're going to be doing a movie review for Bad Boys for Life. This is the Sony Pictures release, the return of Bad Boys, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith coming back to do, Martin Lawrence to be Marcus and Will Smith to be Mike Lowry. It was a nice return to form for this movie. I'm going to start this off with some non-spoiler stuff, and then I will go into a little bit of spoilers by the end of it, but I will announce when that happens and put up a little flag so that way if you want to check out, you can. What I liked about this movie and what I really appreciated about it was the fact that this movie was way better action film than it had any right to be, considering that it was released in January. This very much felt like a summer action film, even though it's in the wintertime. And that usually doesn't happen. Usually with your January releases, you get these films that are like really garbage. Last year I remember watching Cold Pursuit roughly around like January, February timeframe. Oh my god, that movie was terrible, and the action was awful, and it was just a really bad film. This movie does not suffer from such a thing. It's really nice to see a return from Martin Lawrence and from Will Smith playing these characters who we really do enjoy. It still has that comedy, it still has that action, so both pieces are still there, but the one thing that I think this movie introduces that's interesting is it introduces a level of like horror element to it, which I think is just a function of maybe a new director. Michael Bay did not come back to direct this movie. They have a new director on this one, but I think he maybe brought a little bit more of a horror element to the film, which I appreciated. But that said, I did go with my brother, who is also a big Bad Boys fan, and he said, he really didn't appreciate kind of the supernatural horror elements that were brought into the film, and thought that it kind of messed with the essence of the original, what the films really were. So for some people that introduction of that horror element might not work for them, especially if they're fans of the franchise throughout. But for me, it did work, and it didn't really, taint my experience within the film. I feel like, honestly, who gave me some of the best performances within the film was Martin Lawrence. I really appreciated the emotion that he brought to some of the scenes within the film. I also really liked, again, Will Smith can act all day. He also has some really great emotional beats within the film. Some nice introduced new characters is like Will Smith's work girlfriend. I don't know the actress's name. I did not look it up before I started, but she does a really nice job within the film. Also, what's interesting with this movie is I think it's trying to elevate itself a little bit, and this is the first time to me that the Bad Boys franchise felt like a Mission Impossible film, or like elevated itself even further to like James Bond status. And what I mean by that is that with this film, you get not just, the main crew, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, Marcus and Mike, but you also get like the side crew called Ammo, and they basically are backing up, the duo. And what's fascinating by that, it does have a very, Mission Impossible team feel that you've gotten from those films. And also there's a lot of jet setting that goes on throughout the film, which also lends itself into that kind of, Mission Impossible, multiple locations, kind of we're jotting across the globe kind of thing. Also, where I think it's kind of like Mission Impossible is you've got Will Smith basically seeing the lane that Tom Cruise has gone in and going, oh, well, I can be like an action star, I can still do stunts and all that kind of stuff. And Will Smith seems to be doing the same thing as he carries some of the heavy lifting in some of these action sequences. He very well may have had a stunt double for some of the fight choreography, but still, it worked out really smoothly and it looked really great throughout the film. I'm not surprised Sony is trying to elevate this property in that way, so that way it becomes a proper franchise for them. If I was them, I would also try to elevate this franchise to be more like a James Bond franchise or a Mission Impossible franchise for them. Sony's been knocking it out of the park recently too, with Little Women, with Into the Spider-Verse and their Spider-Man films. They've got Morbius coming out, which I didn't love the trailer for, but people seem to be enjoying. And then they've got this movie. So I mean, they're really doing some good work recently over at Sony, and I understand why they want to make this into a franchise. They've got Jumanji, and now they want to kind of do this. They don't have the rights to Bond anymore, but they still have Spider-Man, so they're trying to make that whole situation work for them, and I think it's really smart to elevate this property in that way. The action sequences were really great within this film, but the other thing that elevates this film is the score by Lorne Balfe, and he just does a phenomenal job throughout. The score within this film is it really builds the hype. It really gives you some emotional beats within it. What I think happens with that is that also, Lorne Balfe did the score for Mission Impossible, so I don't know if that also makes this film feel more like a Mission Impossible film, and did an amazing job on that score. That's one of the best Mission Impossible scores there has been, period. And maybe that's why this film does feel like a Mission Impossible film, but it also felt like he was lending into the old themes of the Bad Boys franchise. And my brother kind of confirmed that when he went with me to go see it. So I feel like, Lorne Balfe differentiates himself enough where it's not exactly like a ripoff of the Mission Impossible Fallout score. Not like, how the 1917 score kind of ripped off Dunkirk. Not like that. It is different enough, but it still has feels of a Mission Impossible score. Overall, really great work, really great action, really great performances by the actors, and overall, really great film for January. It really has no right being as good as it is for an action film in the middle of January. This feels like a summer action blockbuster film, and usually you don't get those until at least like April, maybe in March, but to come out in January, really, really enjoyable. That's pretty much for my non-spoiler section. This is where I am going to dive into spoilers, so if you have not seen the film and you do not want to watch the rest of this, go ahead, check out, go watch the movie, maybe come back later, and then we can pick up where we left off. If you have seen the film, stick around. We're going to dive into some spoilers. And some of the things that I really enjoyed within this film is, so early on in the film, you've got Marcus. He's having he has a grandson. He's trying to, considering retirement, considering his life is kind of reaching the, twilight of his life. And Mike Lowry obviously wants no part of that. Mike is always young and fresh and fly. So, they're having the celebratory dinner for Marcus because Marcus just had a grandson, and Marcus and Mike are in this foot race. And all of a sudden, one of the bad guys throughout the film comes along and takes out Mike Lowry. He shoots him a couple times, and you're like, geez, and they're good bullet shots. So you're really concerned that Mike is dead. Mike, thank goodness, does pull through, but Marcus Lawrence has this really amazing scene. Marcus Lawrence, I just matched those two names. Martin Lawrence has this amazing scene where he's basically bargaining, with God, like, please let Mike live. And I totally understand that, because if I was in those shoes, and he even says that, Mike's like my brother, and if I could, he's his best friend, and when your best friend, if your brother is like dying, of course you're going to bargain with God and say, please let them live, whatever you need to do, whatever you can do. I really felt the emotion within that scene from Martin Lawrence. I thought he did an amazing job there. Other great beats throughout the film. Spoiler alert, you're walking along, having a good old time with, the captain, played by Joe Pantoliano, who comes back again. Really great work on his part to come back and play that angry, captain. But, the captain and Mike Lowry are having a conversation, and all of a sudden, boom, Captain snuffed out with a bullet to the neck, and he dies, and it was crazy. It was shocking. It came out of nowhere, so I thought that was really great stuff. What you get throughout the film is you realize that early on in the film, this woman is broken out of jail, and you realize she's the main villain of the film. She really does a great job, and it really gives you kind of a twisted, sinister, she's a cold-hearted killer, and even Mike Lowry says it in the film, so she really does play well into those aspects. Now, again, as I talked about earlier, there is some kind of supernatural elements to it, like they call her the Bruja, the witch, so she kind of plays in like some, religious, supernatural voodoo kind of stuff like that. So I think for some Bad Boys fans, like my brother, he really didn't like that, and I think if you're a fan of the franchise, that might not work for you. But for me, it really did work, and I think it gave her a really sinister quality that was menacing and intimidating, and I thought that really worked and was great. What you find out is that she's tasked her son to be like this assassin on her behalf because she wants to plot revenge on the people who put her in jail and got her husband killed. So she tasks her son to basically plot all this revenge, taking out all these cops, which include the captain, and then also, trying to take out Mike Lowry. And what you realize later on in the film is Mike realizes that basically this kid trying to take him out is his son. And that's to me, that kind of, I didn't love that kind of twist. I mean, it was okay. It felt a little shoehorned in, to be honest. Like, I don't know if the franchise had built itself up to there. It's interesting that it went there. I don't know if I love it. I don't necessarily hate it. It just didn't fully work for me. Ultimately, those kind of pieces didn't work the best, but where the film didn't do well in the story department there, I feel like the action really came back around and helped make up for that poor kind of story writing in there. A couple cute little references that I felt throughout the film. Mike Lowry has this one line about Ammo. Vanessa Hudgens is in that group, Ammo, and he mentions that Ammo is basically this High School Musical type of group, which I found funny because she was in High School Musical, so I think that was a little bit of a nod and a reference. One of the guys that I really did like, there was this guy in Ammo who was like the computer guy, but he was really buff, and they kept making jokes about it the whole time. And basically what you learn is that he doesn't want to be out in the field causing violence because he doesn't want to be that type of person. Essentially, you learn a little bit of a backstory where he really caused somebody some injury. I think he killed them, and he didn't want to be this violent guy, and he needed some therapy because of that. I think it has an honest and really progressive conversation about, hey, if you're in this type of line of work, you may need some therapy for PTSD or whatever if you are causing violence on some people. So I thought that was really forward-thinking conversation to have within an action film. Later on, he does talk about wanting to go into group therapy, and and you know, Mike and Marcus are like, yeah, we'll go, and then they walk off camera and they're like, no, we won't go. And I think that's okay as well. If you think you don't, you know, need it or don't want it and it's not for you, it's not like you should have to go. But I think it had an honest conversation where they weren't rude to the guy who was talking about needing therapy. They were just, you know, they were sympathizing and saying, yeah, you know, that's good for you, but then they don't need it for themselves. The cool part about that guy is that at one point later on in the film, he has his own moment where he's a real Billy badass and takes out a couple people and really unleashes. So I thought that was really cool to show that aspect of him, considering they talked so much about how he was kind of subdued. One other thing that kind of gave me a little reference and a nod to a thing, and obviously there's a lot of references to previous films throughout this movie. Michael Bay has a cameo in it, which is really fascinating. But one thing that I really thought was funny is that there's the scene where, and it's toward the climax of the film, where Mike Lowry's climbing up the church that they're in, the chapel, and the villain female, the Bruja, and her son are standing on this balcony, and this helicopter comes in and drops a ladder down, and it felt just, it was hard for me not to feel very Batman 1989. It's hard for me not to see those things within films, so that had a very essence of that. Other than that, the film was really well for me. Again, really great action, really good stuff for an action movie in the middle of January. It has no right being as good as it is, and having that great blockbuster action as good as it was in a film like this in the middle of January. Really great stuff. Are you excited that the Bad Boys are back, and are you excited to see another go around with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith? You know, I certainly was going into it. Are you kind of over the franchise? Or you know, after the second one, do you feel like it's a proper ending and we're good to go? Go ahead, comment down below. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to the top, that way you don't miss any of my new content. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.